A few months ago, I debated with myself about a short story. Do I kill the main protagonist or not? That simple question led to a battle of philosophical values in myself. How could I kill off the main character, which is part of the theme, when that would create a tragic and despairing story? For I ask myself, what if somebody who's in a really bad place watches my story? For months, the question has been percolating in my head. I researched Friedrich Nietzsche, read a bit of Fyodor Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment. I searched for a solution in my favorite works. The problem was, two of my most respected authors had views on this position, J.R.R. Tolkien and Frank Herbert, and they dealt with them differently. So as to say, through the themes in their books, they gave a side. So, which side should I choose?
It's like in the great stories, Mr. Frodo. The ones that really mattered. Full of darkness and danger they were. But in the end, it's only a passing thing. Folk in those stories had lots of chances of turning back, only they didn't. Because they were holding on to something. What are we holding on to, Sam? That there's some good in this world, Mr. Frodo. And it's worth fighting for.
Speeches like this, they could change lives. Many people live in their stories. Perhaps if those stories are more hopeful, then they would look at life with a more positive lens. Dune, though, has a very different theme. I mean, there are no good characters. There are only characters who performed good actions for corrupt reasons, and there are characters who take evil actions for good goals. It is all about how power corrupts even those with the most pure of intentions. But on that same token, The Lord of the Rings says quite the same thing, in a way. Despite Frodo's best intentions and effort, he eventually succumbed to the temptation of power. Boromir only wanted to save Gondor and was a hero, but he also failed. The difference is, though, the closest thing in Dune to a pure character is Duke Leto. In the end, it didn't work out for him. Paul Atreides, spoiler alert for the sequels, failed in his ultimate goal because he got cold feet and couldn't do what he saw needed to be done. In the end, Emperor Leto II had to do it by becoming a tyrant, by becoming the God Emperor of Dune. The Lord of the Rings, though, had pure characters. Immediately, what springs to mind is Samwise Gamgee. When the ring attempted to control him, it tempted him with an enormous garden. You can predict where that went.
That's for Frodo! That's for the Shire! And that's for my own cavern!
So, to properly understand what we are asking ourselves, we must first define nihilism. A complicated, nuanced task that, given the time constraints, I can't fully explore. For the sake of this video essay, I will define nihilism as the belief, the idea that all belief systems are false. This is an abbreviation, but I think it should do. By the way, this is classical nihilism. There are many different branches, they take on many different aspects, but this classical nihilism is pure nihilism. In the end though, we must ask the question, is including nihilistic beliefs in fictional works moral? In the late 19th century, Friedrich Nietzsche brought nihilism into the world's gaze with his writings. Afterwards, many famous Russian writers wrote about nihilism. Dostoevsky, Lev Tolstoy, for it gripped their nation to its core after Tsar Alexander II instituted new social reforms. Many among the liberals praised the Tsar for his progressive changes, but the intelligentsia were less than satisfied. The existing order is bad, but it is only by understanding its nature that we can possibly destroy it. This quote encapsulates what it was. Russian nihilism, feel free to correct me in the comments, was the precursor to anarchism. They believed that society, capitalism, and the traditional ideas of morality and social propriety should be torn down, once understood. Doesn't this have a familiar ring to it? What if somebody who is mentally vulnerable watches a movie or reads a story like that? Somebody who's questioning life, going through depression. The thing is, people's lives are changed by stories. Giving hope during dark times is of course important, but how do tragedies handle this? You would think tragedies are doom and gloom, but if you look closer, many of them are not. For example, one of, if not the, most famous tragedy of all time, Romeo and Juliet. Despite Shakespeare saying he wrote it because he was tired of reading stories in which love always came out on top, it has hope. After Romeo and Juliet killed themselves, their families renounced their grudges. So, in the end, their deaths were not in vain, for they helped unite a city in mourning. If the families had instead blamed each other and the divide got worse, it would have been nihilistic. For it to be nihilistic, the characters' actions shouldn't matter, despite everything they sacrificed. For a second example, Revenge of the Sith. It is basically Shakespearean tragedy in space. At the end, when Anakin killed Padme by breaking her feelings, the twins lived. A spark of hope in an otherwise dark night. If Anakin had killed the twins along with Padme, it would have been a very different story along with a very different theme. Crime and punishment. Even though it isn't a tragedy, it still ends with hope. Dune's world is full of nihilism, and Frank Herbert criticized it. In fact, The Lord of the Rings and Dune criticized it, but in very different ways. Dune had characters in a very indifferent universe, where seemingly everyone was out for themselves. Nobody was clean. Each character grappled with some form of nihilism. The Lord of the Rings, though, had an outside nihilistic force against a universe filled with the little innocent people. So, which world more closely resembles our own? That would be a subjective opinion, but this would not be a very fair video essay if I did not include both sides of the argument. I will start with this. Depression and destruction are often associated with nihilism, but they are not part of its principles. They are not inherent in it. Not all nihilists experience depression and vice versa. Perhaps nihilism should be included in stories. Why, you ask? A reader lives 1,000 lives before he dies. The man who never reads has lived one. George R.R. Martin. A Dance with Dragons. In those lives, a few should be nihilistic. In order for us to have a more complete understanding of the universe, we should experience all of its aspects. Nihilism is just another philosophy for dealing with the tragedy of life. And why not experience it? Indeed, why not try every philosophy? Anarchism, Stoicism, Existentialism, I could go on. Perhaps the more nihilistic it is, the more real and nuanced your experience is. Fight Club is a perfect example of this. Just experiencing the life of somebody like that won't suddenly turn us all into monsters. 12 Monkeys had an interesting take on it as well. It showed you the mind of a doomed man, a violent, monstrous man who seemed to be experiencing a transformation into somebody better. At the end though, it did not matter, as he, trying to prevent a horrible future, died. His death was meaningless, achieved nothing, only to continue the cycle as it was time travel. Just because we experienced the hopelessness of viewers as we watched a meaningless death will not cause depression. If it does, you've got bigger problems than the movie you are watching. In addition, as Friedrich Nietzsche believes, mendaciousness is a fundamental trait of idealism. Does books with idealistic themes participate in this falsehood? Storytelling is exactly how dictators propagate their agendas, which demonstrates how much it influences the life of the common person. This point boils down to one question. Are books with hopeful, idealistic themes propaganda? But what about idealism could be dangerous? One part of it could be the potential promotion of aesthetic ideals. Aesthetic ideals are the practice of denying natural desires in an attempt at purity, controlling one's thoughts. A part of that is denying attachments. Sounds familiar? Nietzsche believed it stifles creativity and individual thought. Aesthetic ideal is the most potent form of a will to nothingness. Friedrich Nietzsche. The will to power. Through that metric, aesthetic ideals are more nihilistic than nihilism. There is the argument that the Jedi were wrong and Luke changed the tenets. The problem with that argument is that he did it in Legends. In the new canon, he made certain of removing attachments, as seen in the book of Boba Fett. So, the aesthetic ideal is somehow superior to nihilism? If nihilism is not good in storytelling, why should the aesthetic ideals be any different? How about this? Isn't it mendacious to provide any sort of ideals or idealism in stories? Perhaps stories should have nihilism in it, for it wouldn't be genuine to have any meaning if those meanings are false. Ideals that can cause this sort of self-harm that is the aesthetic ideals. So, which is true? Can any be really true? This video could be a pointless ramble about a problem without a solution, but such is the nature of philosophy. In the end though, there's very little in the nature of answers. This essay though, is to spark thoughts in you, so as for you to generate your own answer. Do you wish to hear my own answer to this problem? What I believe though, is that the reader makes the decision to read the book or watch the movie. If they think that this book or movie isn't for them, just stop. The author or director can't control who is reading or watching. The game director can't control who is playing. In the end, we, the creators of these stories, give the responsibility over to you, the audience. We have to trust you. We make the decision to trust you. You could take this video as inspiration for your serial murders, cite it as something that pushed you over the edge. I can't stop you. All I can do is trust. Not very unidealistic of me, but I think it is very important. It is important to believe that there are good people out there, even if we don't believe in anything at all. Will you trust? Are you trustworthy? I don't know. I certainly hope so.
I found him.
Thanks for watching this video of my philosophical and psychological ramblings to help my novels in the making. Check out my other videos, hit the like button if I made you think critically, subscribe and gently press that bell button if you think I can do it again. For now, Veronwë out.